Well, thank you very much. Good morning. I apologize. I've got a bit of a cold, so I apologize for the hoarse voice, but it is wonderful to be with you this morning. Thank you for your strong, clear, clarion support of the nation of Israel. You know, for me, support for Israel is a deep, personal, and passionate commitment. And in my time in the Senate now, 7 years, boy, time flies, I've tried to advance the U.S.-Israel friendship and relationship on three parallel paths. First of all, focusing on what I call rifle shot legislation. Single-focused bills that can bring together bipartisan support and that can pass. For example, in the National Defense Authorization Act, year after year I've introduced amendments that have passed into law increasing U.S. military assistance for Israel, increasing funding for the Iron Dome and Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 and the missile defense that has saved so many lives in Israel as they faced rocket attacks and terror attacks at home. And just last December, a bill I introduced passed into law. It was a bill targeting human shields, and it provides for tough sanctions for nations and for organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah that employ human shields either against Americans, against our military, or against our close allies like the nation of Israel. That legislation passed and was signed into law. Both of those are examples of focused, narrow rifle shot legislation that you can pass that makes a difference. And indeed, the human shields legislation built upon several years ago, I had joined with Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and with Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand in authoring two different resolutions that passed the Senate unanimously targeting human shields, condemning the use of human shields as a war crime, and providing rewards for those who kidnap and murder U.S. citizens in Israel. A second component, a second path in terms of strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship is winning hearts and minds. And I got to say, I think all of us in the pro-Israel community, we don't do a good enough job of engaging in the battle of ideas. If you look at college campuses, where the BDS movement is resurgent, we don't do a nearly good enough job making the case, and that's something that I've tried to do consistently. We all remember several years ago when 3 Israeli teenagers had been kidnapped by Hamas. I gave a long speech on the Senate floor with pictures of each of those 3 boys behind me, telling their stories, who they were, what they liked to do. Now, tragically, we didn't know at the time, but we know since those 3 boys were murdered. One of them was a U.S. citizen. That was the legislation I referenced a minute ago that I passed to provide a $5 million reward for information leading to the capture of his terrorists. The importance of telling that story, you know, Stalin chillingly said, one death is a tragedy, a million a statistic. Making the lives that are lost through terrorism in Israel, making them real, helping people understand, I think is tremendously important. Several years ago, I wrote an op-ed. It's called A Tale of Two Hospitals. And it says you can learn a lot about a society by how they treat their most vulnerable. And it compares 2 hospitals. One, the Ziv Hospital in northern Israel that I've visited, that at the time I went there, it had given away over $8 million in free medical care to Syrians over the northern border who had been injured in the horrific civil war there. And I remember meeting with Israeli physicians who described how a little Syrian boy, a little Syrian girl would go to bed in their bedroom, and a barrel bomb would go off and blow up, and they'd be horribly injured. They'd wake up, and those children, more often than not, they were even though they had a horrific injury, they were more terrified of being in Israel surrounded by Israelis. And this one Israeli physician, I remember she told me about a Syrian mother who marveled. She said, my whole life, the government I've been told is there to protect me. Now they're trying to kill me. And my whole life, the people I've been told hate me and want to kill me, now they're saving my life and saving the lives of my kids. Now, in this op-ed, I contrast the Ziv hospital to the hospital in Gaza in whose basement Hamas set up their headquarters. Now, this is a Palestinian hospital, and they are quite literally using Palestinian men, women, children, infants as human shields. Because from their perspective, it's actually a win-win. One of two things from their perspective would happen. One, the IDF would refrain from striking their headquarters. Now, that's a win, obviously. If they don't take out their headquarters, they can continue to plot and organize terrorist attacks. Or two, if the IDF were to strike their headquarters, they would hit the hospital and you would suddenly see the bodies of women and newborn children on the news, and the entire world, particularly the news media, could be counted to denounce Israel and to blame Israel for that loss of life. Prime Minister Netanyahu put it powerfully when he said, "We use our missiles to protect our citizens. They use their citizens to protect their missiles." And so I thank you for the tremendous efforts AJC is doing, and let me encourage you to do more to win hearts and minds, to say there's not a moral equivalency between terrorists who go into civilian populations and blow themselves up and murder innocent women, men, and children, and brave IDF forces who are protecting those innocent men, women, and children who risk their lives. They're not the same, they're not morally equivalent, but we have to explain it, and we have to make the case on the facts and on the merits. The third parallel track I've focused on is big picture, major structural changes. And I want to highlight two in particular. Number one, as we stand here today in 2019, the American Embassy in Israel is in Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. That was a major battle in the Trump administration. As you know, presidents of both parties have promised to move our embassy to Jerusalem, and presidents of both parties have broken that promise. In the Trump administration, there was a major battle. You had both state and defense arguing against moving the embassy. And I was deeply engaged on the other side of that argument, making the case very directly to the president. Now, the argument they gave against moving the embassy is they said it would inflame the tensions with Israel's enemies, that they would be angry at us. I have to admit, my first reaction was like they're not angry already. But I said, listen, if the goal is Middle East peace, and I think this administration hopes to bring about peace, I'm not convinced that's immediately in the offing. But if the goal is peace, I believe moving the embassy makes peace more likely. And the reason that I argued to the president of the administration is I said, listen, if we move the embassy, we can expect our Arab allies. We can expect the Jordanians and the Egyptians and the Saudis to denounce the step. They'll feel they have to because of domestic political reasons. But I said, I believe privately they will be deeply, deeply relieved if we move the embassy, and here's why. Because they will say, you know what? An administration and a president with the backbone, with the guts to move the embassy to Jerusalem and to risk the scorn of the global media opinion, maybe, just maybe, might have the guts and backbone to pull out of the disastrous Iranian nuclear deal. So I was in Jerusalem the day we opened our embassy. It was the 70th anniversary of the creation of the modern state of Israel. I'll tell you, it was a powerful, powerful time. I've been to Israel many times. I've never seen the joy and jubilation. Israelis, Americans dancing in the street. I visited with one woman who was a Holocaust survivor and who just had tears running down her face. She said, I never thought I would live to see this day. That same week that we opened the embassy is the week that the president announced he was withdrawing from the disastrous Iranian nuclear deal. And that was the second big picture battle. Within the Trump administration, a battle raged over that, and the battle lines were exactly the same. You had state and defense both arguing, don't pull out of the deal, keep the deal going. And I engaged very directly with the president and with the administration. I believe that the Iranian nuclear deal was catastrophically foolish. I think sending tens of billions of dollars to the Ayatollah Khamenei, who chants death to America, who calls Israel the little Satan, who calls America the great Satan, I think that was profoundly foolish. If history teaches anything, it's that if someone tells you they want to kill you, believe them. I believe the president pulling out of the Iran deal was the single most important national security decision that has been made in the last 2.5 years. And I have consistently, since that time, been pressing the administration, pressing the State Department to ratchet up the pressure to end the multiple waivers that were in place, the oil waivers that allowed Iran to sell over 1 million barrels of oil a day, the civilian nuclear waivers that allowed Iran to continue nuclear research, including at the Fordo plant, cut into the side of a mountain, a bunker designed to develop nuclear weapons. And we've steadily moved to ratcheting up the pressure. I believe maximum pressure should mean maximum pressure. And so we should use every tool we have to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons because, among other things, not only are they developing nuclear weapons, but they're developing ICBM technology. And ICBM technology is not designed to take a bomb to Israel. You don't need an ICBM to get to Israel. An ICBM has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to take a nuclear weapon to the United States of America. Those changes have been major, they've been significant, and I believe they have dramatically enhanced the safety of both Israel and the United States. Let me point to two other matters that are ongoing right now. This is, on one level, an encouraging time. I think the U.S.-Israel relationship and friendship has never been stronger. On another level, it's a discouraging time. We see the rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic remarks. We see anti-Semitic cartoons in the New York Times. We see anti-Semitic comments by members of Congress. For a long time, there's been a strong bipartisan commitment to the U.S.-Israel relationship. And I thank the AJC for the important role y'all play in keeping that commitment going. That commitment, I believe, has been frayed, and it's painful to see it frayed. One of the things we saw was the House of Representatives unable to pass even a simple anti-Semitism resolution that condemned anti-Semitism unequivocally. That divisions within the Democratic Party paralyzed them. Now, I want to give you some good news. In the Senate, I've introduced a simple, clear resolution condemning anti-Semitism in all its forms. And it was important for me for this not to be a partisan exercise, and so I reached out and teamed up with Senator Tim Kaine. The two of us together, it's the Cruz-Kaine resolution. We have right now over 50 senators who are co-sponsors, including 12 Democrats who are co-sponsors of the anti-Semitism resolution. It is my hope that we will take this up on the floor of the Senate, we will vote on it, and I think if we do, I think there's a real chance that we will end up voting 100-0, and I think it would be very, very important at this point in time to see a unanimous, bipartisan, clear condemnation of anti-Semitism. So as y'all are visiting with senators, I would encourage you to encourage them to get on board. I think it is important for us to speak with one voice. There's a second piece of legislation I have that is substantive legislation that recognizes the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Now that is something the administration did unilaterally, and I leaned in hard urging the administration to do that unilaterally. If you look at the substance, almost nobody makes the case on the other side anymore. There was a time 20 years ago where you might argue about whether the Golan Heights is legitimately part of Israel. Nobody makes that argument today. Nobody within Israeli politics makes that argument today. And nobody from an American perspective does either, because no one in their right mind would want the Golan Heights under the control of Bashar Assad and Syria's government, much less under the control of Iran or Russia. It is clear the Golan Heights are critical to the safety and security of Israel. They are part of Israel, so recognizing it is simply acknowledging reality. I think it is important that we codify that into law so that there is not a risk of a the next administration potentially undoing that decision. I don't want this to be subject to political whims. In the House, a number of House Democrats have spoken out publicly in favor of the policy of recognizing the Golan, but to date, none of those House Democrats have been willing to join the legislation doing that. In the Senate, I think if we tee it up and get a vote in the Senate, I think we've got a real chance at once again getting a 100-0 vote, getting a bipartisan, unequivocal, clear statement of the entire United States Senate coming together to stand with Israel. I hope that we do that. I think it's important right now at this moment of time that we show clear, strong unanimity. So I thank you for the leadership of the AJC, building and maintaining that support. And I am grateful, I am honored to stand with each of you. Thank you.